Because like traditional anti-Semitism, the so-called new anti-Semitism is equally obsessive, equally insane in the focus on its target. And lastly, and this is a very important point, an age-old tactic of anti-Semitism is to blame the Jew for the anti-Semitic response. This is as old as anti-Semitism itself. In fact, you may know here in Europe that Kristallnacht was blamed on something a Jew did and not something fictional. This was actually a real event. No blood and matzah this time. The assassination of a German diplomat by Herschel Greenspan, a Jewish kid. But just because the Nazis claimed that that's why Kristallnacht happened, nobody believes that. We understand today, and we're clear-eyed today, that Kristallnacht was part of the Nazi strategy of destroying the Jewish people. That's what Kristallnacht was about. Just because the Nazis blamed something a Jew did, we all understand what the truth is. Well, in the new anti-Semitism, the words and actions of those who hate the Jewish people in the state of Israel is always blamed on Israel. Something Israel does, either fictionally or actually. A building project here, a military operation there. But ladies and gentlemen, don't be fooled. Just like we don't believe it in the case of Kristallnacht, we should not believe that the anti-Semitic actions of those who hate Israel is motivated by something Israel does, by something the prime minister said, or by one thing or another thing that Israel does. That's not to say that Israel can't be criticized. My country can be criticized. Every country can be criticized. But don't mistake criticism for actual motivation of rank, unvarnished anti-Semitism. And we have to be clear-eyed that the Israel haters aren't responding to something Israel does. The Israel haters are responding to something in them. And so this is why this conference today is so important. And Rabbi, I thank you, and Minister, I thank you for putting this together. Because it is time to say enough is enough. Enough ignoring this third leg of the stool of anti-Semitism today. We don't ignore the anti-Semitism of the far right. We shouldn't ignore the anti-Semitism of radical Islam. And we must not ignore the third stool of this leg, which is the unvarnished, dangerous, and increasingly prevalent anti-Semitism that focuses on Jewish peoplehood, Jewish ethnicity, on Zionism, and on the State of Israel. I'm here to express the United States position that this is anti-Semitism, and we stand unequivocally with the State of Israel in combating this scourge. And when all good-minded people, when all governments of goodwill will stand together on this, we will see a better world, and we will bequeath to the next generation a world free of this despicable hatred that breeds so many other despicable forms of hatred. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Carr. Just before we open to questions, I would like to emphasize that you have the report and the press release in various languages waiting for you out there, and right after we finish you will be able to take. And again, there are several languages, so please choose whatever is more convenient for you, both the report and the press release. We will open it to questions. Please, Eldad Beck, Israel Hayom.
Mr. Adam, I heard you calling governments and municipalities to adopt a definition calling hideous anti-Semitism. I didn't hear you call the EU and the European Parliament to do that. Second question, in your report you are praising the German Bundestag for its decision on this issue. However, the German government has until now did not take any practical move on this issue. There has been a list given to the German government of organizations being financed by Germany, no response. The responsible of the government for religious freedom met 10 days ago with a BDS activist. And the worst of all, Chancellor Merkel has expressed her support of the 4 democratic BDS congresswomen. What can be done about that?
she also allowed the march to support Hezbollah to march in Berlin, or I don't remember what city was it. I didn't say that the situation is perfect. We have a lot of work to do, and that is why it is so important, the work that Mr. Carr is doing, and other people who are helping us, because as I said, the BDS organizations and the leadership, they understand that they need to disguise their anti-Semitism. So sometimes they call it freedom of expression, sometimes they call it human rights. It doesn't matter. It's a disguise. And that is what we need to expose together. That is why we praised the German parliament. Oh, sorry. That is why we praised the parliament, the Bundestag decision. But unfortunately, since then, we didn't see any implementation to that decision. And that is why, from here, after the conference afternoon, I'm going to fly to Berlin, and I'm going to hand our new report to Minister Seehofer, the Minister of Home Affairs of the German government, and I would try to discuss with him how this report and how the declaration of the Bundestag can be implemented into practical steps that the municipalities. By the way, few municipalities already initiated important steps. For example, they did not allow BDS activists and even singers that support the BDS with anti-Semitic symbols to perform in, I believe it was in Berlin, Frankfurt, and Munich. And there were other domestic steps, but that is not enough. We expect that if we all understand, as President Macron and Chancellor Merkel and Prime Minister Trudeau and other world leaders had announced that this is the new kind of anti-Semitism, we expect them to fight it and to implement those declarations into practical steps, because if this is racism, no Western country or a country that share the same values can stand without do anything to fight it.
Thank you. Please, if you will be kind to represent yourself.
Luca Clementi for the magazine of the Jewish Community of Rome. My question is for Minister Dan and Mr. Carr. We changed the government recently, and which is the point of view...
In Israel as well?
In Italy.
Oh, okay.
No. Which is the point of view of America and Israel about the positions of the Zionist question of the new government? Because you know that movement, the Five-Star Movement and the Democratic Party gave some problems in Italy for the Zionists.
So we don't get involved in the internal politics of any country, and when I do diplomacy on behalf of the United States, which that's my job on this issue, I'm America's diplomat on this issue. I always come with an open mind. You know, whatever is said in a campaign or whatever position a government takes, I never come with bias. I sit down with leaders of a country, and I thank them for the good things they're doing. And by the way, there are many good things. You know, you pick any country in Eastern Europe or Western Europe, and there are many things to praise on this issue. But there are also things that need to be worked on and fixed. And by the way, that goes for my country as well. I mean, we all have things we need to improve on. And so I come with an open mind and I say, thank you for the good things you're doing. And now let's talk about the other things. And I'm happy to report that the response that I've gotten in every country I've visited, which is, I think, 9, 10 by now, has been incredibly positive. There is a real willingness to work on this. And I think the reason for that is that nobody has lost the message that this is a real problem. I mean, you can't it's not a stretch to say we're worried about it. Everybody understands anti-Semitism is rising. And look, think about it. We are approaching this January, the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. It hasn't been 75 years since the Nazi crematoria have cooled. And anti-Semitism on the rise in Europe? How can that be? It's appalling. And by the way, that's not an indictment of Europe. That doesn't point to anything wrong in Europe. What it points to is the relentless nature of this hatred, this ancient hatred that recurs over and over again. And that's why I said enough is enough. We've got to come together. Every government, every community has to come together. And by the way, not only Jewish community, every community has to come together and say enough is enough. And if we do that, we'll win.
Thank you so much.
I can only add that I agree with Mr. Carr. We do not intervene in other countries' politics, and whoever will be elected by the Italian people, we of course will be happy to work with and to learn his opinions, and if we will have disagreements, we'll try to convince. I hope that we won't share together something very bad, which is political instability in Italy and Israel. So that is something we both have to improve anyway.
Please, sir. Yeah.
Thank you. Musa Abdelot, Brussels Times. I would like to ask Minister Erdan and also Mr. Carr. First, a small question to the Minister. You remember that just before the election in Israel, the Sunday before, there was an incident at European delegation or embassy in Tel Aviv. And some people vandalized the entrance. I would like to ask you if the police investigation has been finalized and the people have been charged for anything. That's a very simple question. On the more global overall question about anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, I would like to ask you whether there is not a risk that the line between those two are blurred. That we tend to accuse people who criticize Israel or oppose the occupation or call for end of settlement construction and so on, and would like to revive the peace process. In Israel, they call for the leftists, or even sometimes traitors, and so it's easy, let's say, to use that as a pretext to legitimate criticism against this.
So the question was about the question to me was about blurring the lines between legitimate criticism of Israel and anti-Semitism. I think it's very important not to do that. That's why the IRA definition, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, is so very important because it draws those lines. And there are lines. I mean, look, it's not hard to figure out whether criticism of Israel is legitimate or whether it's a mask for anti-Semitism, to use the term mask, right? Unmasked. That's not hard to figure out. When you look at the examples given by the IRA definition, and they're excellent, delegitimizing the state of Israel, considering the creation of Israel to be a racist endeavor, denying the Jewish people's self-determination, is anti-Semitism. And so if the criticism is a mask for seeking the elimination of the one Jewish state in the world, it's anti-Semitism. Another example, and this is really where the line is drawn, it is, by definition, under the IRA definition, anti-Semitism. And let me just say, the IRA definition of anti-Semitism has been adopted by many countries. The United States uses it. The OSCE voted 56-1 to adopt it. Only Russia was the one no vote, but 56-1 to adopt IRA. Now, OSCE you don't get many votes like that, 56-1. So it's just been overwhelmingly embraced. One of the examples given of anti-Semitism in the official definition is the application of double standards to the state of Israel. What that means is, you want to criticize Israel? Absolutely. Have at it. It's legitimate to do that. But it's got to be fair. If the criticism really is a double standard, is holding Israel to a standard that is not applied to any other country, well, you can't do that. You can't say, well, the Jew gets a different standard from anyone else. Have a fair standard. Any country can be criticized. United States, Israel, every country can be criticized as long as one is being fair. That's where the line is drawn. And let me say, you will never hear me say something is anti-Semitic just because it's criticism of the United States, of Israel, nor will I say that something is anti-American just because it questions a policy of the United States. I would never do that. And it's very important that none of us do that. But a lot of what's going on here is rank, unvarnished anti-Semitism. And just because some criticism of Israel can be legitimate shouldn't dissuade us from combating anti-Semitism. We have to be able to draw that line, fight the evil of anti-Semitism, and accept legitimate criticism.
Rabbi Margolin, you wanted to...
Concerning the vandalism that took place against the European, the EU embassy, so it's still under. I know that it was investigated, but the decision whether to indict those who admitted of doing it is, it's not under my constituency or my authority. And I believe they will decide in the next few weeks, but it's still under investigation. Of course, we condemned it and we see it severely, what happened there, the vandalism, of course.
Good morning, Samuel Petruquin for the Associated Press. Just a question about the numbers you gave us. I would like to know how you gathered that data and where do the numbers come from?
Director General.
Tzachi, Director General. So a few, I would say, clarifications about the report. You have it all. Well, the report contains 80 different examples of, as the Minister Don said, classical anti-Semitism, Holocaust inversion, denied the Jewish right to self-determination, 6 months of research, 4 languages. We have been checking a lot of online materials, and I'm speaking about online, not kind of someone hiding in the dark and saying this exact chants, quotes, and narratives. And we should remember that all of the information in this new report is considering BDS activists, BDS mainly leaders. We have been looking for the leaders approach, because this is all about trickling down. It's funneling down to the student in campus. The student in campus in Paris, the student in campus in, let's say, Cincinnati or New York, because he sees these leaders of this BDS campaign as a human rights activist, as the Minister and Mr. Carr said. And when we understood that our point of view is, first of all, check what BDS leaders, BDS organizations, by the way, you have in the appendix, and I guess appendix B in the booklet, you have all the list of all the different BDS organizations worldwide, mainly on Europe, US, and South Africa listed. As well, you will have the different names of BDS activists and leaders cited in the report. And this, we speak about leaders. We haven't gone down to the specific activists on campus. By the way, if you would like to know about campus, we have been seeing online very troubling materials being spread and being scattered around social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, by a large anti-Israel network on US campuses. It's called SJP, Student for Justice in Palestine, with a very troubling, and I'm saying it as Israeli, as a Jew living in Israel. But what about a Jew living in the US when he sees LOL, laugh out loud for anyone who doesn't know the acronym. LOL, let's take some Jews to the oven. Let's kill your local Zionist. And it's a discussion going on. Still, I think it wasn't omitted from Twitter. Oh, and you ask about the number of anti-Semitic events.
Attacks, yeah, the 387
So this comes from Cantor Cantor Center for the Research of Anti-Semitism, working in conjunction with the with Tel Aviv University. It has been publishing the data for 2018. Soon, I guess, it will publish the data for 2019.
Can I also jump in on another number? Again, I'm not here to comment on Israel's report, but we monitor, and my office monitors anti-Semitic incidences and hate crimes in every country. And there was recently a survey done by the Fundamental Rights Agency of the EU that published extremely disturbing polling results. First of all, in some countries in Europe, nearly 90% of the Jewish community identified anti-Semitism as a serious problem and rising in their country, and a substantial portion of those were considering emigrating, literally leaving the country because of anti-Semitism. That is just heartbreaking. But then there's another interesting number. When Jews surveyed by the FRA poll were asked, have you experienced an anti-Semitic incident in the last year? A substantial portion said yes, which is way above in numbers the number of incidences we have reported, which indicates, assuming everything's accurate, it indicates that there is a great underreporting, which the minister hinted at, that we think the incidences are more. So when you look at the FRA survey, again, assuming that's accurate polling, which we have no reason to believe it isn't, it's a reputable pollster did it, then it's actually much higher than what is actually reported to either Jewish agencies or to the police. Now, however you splice this, the bottom line is it's not good, and these numbers should be disturbing to absolutely everybody, not just to Jews. Again, this isn't it's not right or left, it's not Jews or non-Jews. Nobody, no normal person should think this is acceptable. And that's why we have to come together and say enough is enough. And by the way, in Western Europe, a lot of these incidences are motivated by Israel hatred, or at least dressed up as Israel hatred. That's just appalling.
Thank you, the lady in the back. I'm trying to keep it on the order of requesting. So I see you and Ilana, please.
Paula, Celine from Euronews. It's a question for
Euronews?
Euronews. It's a question for the minister. You already mentioned some expectations from Joseph Borrell. How do you see him as the next interlocutor for EU-Israel relations, given his known position for the recognition of Palestinian state?
What was the last question?
Yeah, how do you see him as the next interlocutor for EU-Israel relations, given his known position for the recognition of Palestinian state?
I thought all of the European leadership are in favor of a Palestinian state, so that is not something new. We do not give grades to European leaders, and we respect democracy, and we respect whoever is being elected. And we will work with High Representative Borrell as well, and we'll try to solve every disagreement. Again, we're not going to judge anyone because of something he said or did in his past. He is going to have now a very important role, as we see it, because we see Europe as our partner, and it is a very important partner for the government of Israel and for the people of Israel. And we need to strengthen our ties. And the rise of anti-Semitism is a huge problem that we need to solve. And the first responsibility is on the shoulders of the European leadership, where we are here to expose the truth and to tell you where do we see the problems that are taking place in Europe, hiding behind human rights masks or other masks, but on the contrary, it is encouraging anti-Semitism and violence against Jews and against the state of Israel, and that is what we will try to convince High Representative Borrell. But we're not going to decide, even before he started his job, his position, that cannot be that we cannot convince him. And again, I mentioned High Representative Mogherini. The first expectation is not to put your head in the sand and ignore what you can see, because money is fungible, and you can't say, I'm going to allocate funds to this organization, even though this organization is supporting and encouraging and proactively working to boycott Israel, but we will ignore it because they have other activities. Money is fungible, and if the EU real policy is against the BDS and against boycotting Israel, as I mentioned, the leaders who said important things against it, so it must be translated into practical steps, and no European taxpayers should pay for boycotting Israel if we are your partners as we see it.
My first question is to Mr. Carr. I just wanted to ask if you're able to expand a little bit more on what you'll be doing in the Gulf states with discussing anti-Semitism. And my second question is to both Minister Erdan and to Mr. Carr. We're seeing, especially in Europe and I think in the United States as well, a large amount of the next generation not knowing about the Holocaust, not understanding it, not knowing the names of camps. We've had a lot of polls that have come out, the CNN poll, etc., that have come out about that. And are we seeing that lack of knowledge is feeding into why BDS is becoming so strong among the next generation and on campuses, etc.?
Yeah, great questions.
Members of Congress, they don't know a lot about campus.
So I'll start with Holocaust education. I think this is really, I think, an indictment of all of our educational systems. The fact that more and more kids in schools don't know what the Holocaust is and have never heard of Auschwitz is, I think, a sad fact. And this is something we need to fix. I mean, Holocaust education is a moral obligation we have to the victims of that most despicable display of hatred. But something else, too. It is very hard to fight anti-Semitism